Hi, I'm Sarah Davis. I'm an educator at the Illinois State Museum, and today we are out at Jubilee Farm in New Berlin filming bird banding. So if you want to come with me, we'll walk over to the bird banding station and see what they're up to.
Roughly about 19 different sizes of bands, and so each band is a different, what we call a different gauge. And so and each species has a recommended size. And we also have tools that we use to measure to make sure we have the right size. But generally, the recommended sizes work pretty well. My name is Tony Rotring. I am a biology professor at Lincoln Land Community College. And I've been banding birds for over 10 years. I've been interested in birds ever since I was in junior high, and it's just it's a way that I can be close to birds to study the organisms that I'm most fascinated with, and to also share that with other people. And so there are just about any bird. I mean, the smallest band size that we use are for hummingbirds. And then we can go up to ones that you would put on like a Canada goose or a bald eagle, but we're not banding those types of birds out here.
They are getting ready to go out and check the nets to see if they've caught any birds, and then they'll bring them back here, and Tony will put the bands on them.
They're called mist nets. They're the same nets that we use to catch bats as well, and they're a very fine. You can see they're a very fine mesh. And when you stretch it out, it's almost invisible. That's the point. Okay, it's set up in with these sort of pockets. So the idea is that the bird comes along, hits the net, and falls into the pocket. Okay, and then it sort of lays there. It can't really get out, and then we can just come in and pluck them out of the pocket. I'm Samantha Reif. I'm a geology professor at Lincoln Land Community College. I have been a hobby birder probably most of my life, but I took Tony Rotering's Intro to Bird Identification class a few years ago, and that really ramped up my interest. We run the nets about every 40 minutes so that the birds aren't in the nets for very long, to keep them safe, because their health is our main goal. Obviously, we want the birds to live long and happy lives with their new jewelry.
Is there reasons you put them in certain places?
Sure. So we look for habitat. So we want to catch different kinds of birds. But we also look for places where the nets are hidden. So you'll notice there's a deadfall here, and there's some brush. When we put up the nets, it was winter. There was no leaves, but you'll see that these bushes here are getting leaves. The grasses are starting to grow up, and so these nets are going to start to be harder to see. And sometimes even as we're walking up to a net, see something in the bushes and it'll flush. We can catch as many birds as fall into the net during peak migration. And if you've got a good habitat, because a lot of birds move in flocks, so we can catch the entire flock. So we can catch 10, 12 more birds in a net at a time. Okay, so we just removed this guy from the net. He's safe and sound. I'm going to put him in a bag.
Getting caught in the net and going into the bags doesn't hurt them, or?
Nope. So you're right. The net itself is designed for this size bird. So your backyard birds. Bigger birds, like Tony was talking about, eagles and geese and things like that. Bigger birds, because the way the net works, that it's this pocket, a big bird will not fit in this pocket. And all it has to do is open its wings, and it'll pop right back out. So these nets are designed just to catch a certain kind of bird, and we're just looking for, as Tony said, those backyard birds like songbirds and woodpeckers and things like that.
See how he likes to bite?
Yeah, he's okay. He's okay.
This?
This is a black-capped chickadee.
Very cool.
Everything that we do the number one priority is always the birds. So we have to make sure that we're not going to be doing any harm to them, because that's the last thing we want to happen. So therefore, the nets are only up and opened when we are here and able to monitor them. And we do go around about every 40 minutes, just like what you did, and check the nets. Then when we're finished, if we're here at Jubilee Farm, since we only band 1 day a week, then we close up the nets and then we take them down, and we take them home with us.
And how long during the year do you band?
So we band during, if we're focusing on migration, which is primarily what we do, and that's what we're doing here, then we want to cover basically all of migration. We want to hit all the different types of migrants. So there are migrants that just pass through. There are migrants that winter here and then go further north. And then there are the migrants who are coming from somewhere south. It could be the southern U.S. or all the way down into the neotropics. And they're going to nest here. And then, of course, we want the resident birds as well. So we usually start mid-March, and we'll go all the way until about the last week of May in the spring. In the fall, we start at the tail end of August, and we'll go all the way through, let's say, Veterans Day, the second week in November. So that way we're covering pretty much the entire migration season. Each one of these bands has a 9-digit number on it. It's very similar to a Social Security number. And once this band goes on this bird's leg, that number will never be associated with another bird in North America again. These bands, these pliers, by the way, they are specially made so that they're machined out, kind of like a needle nose pliers, so that when you put the band on the bird's leg, it doesn't matter how hard I squeeze, I cannot over squeeze it and crimp the band onto the bird's leg. And then sometimes it doesn't always do it perfectly, so we have to kind of go back and just clean it up. We want the two ends to perfectly meet, so nothing can get caught in there. So that would, hinder the bird. The bands fit just like a bracelet. So when they're properly closed, they're not crimped around the leg. It's not hurting the leg at all. It just slides up and down. And a lot of times people will ask if the birds ever outgrow the band. And this portion of the bird's leg does not really have any muscle in it. It just has skin, and bones, and a couple tendons. And so it never increases in size or decreases in size. So therefore that band's not going to have any kind of a negative impact on it. I'm going to take a couple measurements. So this is just a couple standard measurements that are taken. It's kind of like going to the doctor and having your blood pressure taken, your height and weight. And that's just what we're doing here, just taking a couple metrics. This is called a wing chord measurement. It goes from their wrist bones to the tips of their outermost flight feathers, these feathers right here, which are called their primaries. And so we measure this in millimeters. It's 91. And I'll also take a tail length measurement, go right in the middle of their tail feather. It's basically just for comparisons. It's one little measurement from one cardinal in the grand scheme is not that important. But when you look at all the measurements for the cardinals that we band, or in the big picture for all that are banded in North America, we can look for geographic variations, we can look for sex variations, age variations, spatial time variations, or temporal. So we can look for all kinds of different changes, whether it's looking at food availability, the impacts of habitat loss, climate change, all those things. And literally we're talking like 1.2 million birds are banded every single year in North America. So the data set, there's really very few other creatures that have that much data collected on. The governing agency, or the clearinghouse for all bird banding data in North America, is a government entity. It's called the Bird Banding Lab, and it's within the U.S. Geological Survey. So at the end of the calendar year, that is where all of our data goes. And that data, by the way, is easily accessible too. It's you literally, if by chance someone were to ever find a bird that is banded, say a hunter takes a duck or a dove that has a band on it, they literally can just plug the number in. You just go to reportaband.gov or just Google it, and you plug in that number, and it will give you instant feedback. And so we're going to get a weight. We have kind of an interesting way that we do weights, and they get stuck in a tube on top of this scale. Doing a headstand. .7. So that bird's been successfully processed. So now we release it, and we move on to the next one. Before there you go, perfect. You got it. Well done.
That's so cool.